But yeah, so this tool isn't really as useful to me just because it doesn't really make sense to me because it still keeps the transparency on the original layer, and so it doesn't really have any non-destructive qualities to it. And I'll show you what I'm talking about with this in a second. So let me undo what we just did there. On the other hand, if I do the same thing, so if I erase this again, there's another layer mode that will actually take the transparency off of the layer and put it onto a layer mask. And that is slightly more useful to me because the whole point of a layer mask is to be non-destructive, meaning that you can go back at any time and undo the layer mask and it'll revert the image back to the original. So I've erased all these parts here on the image, and if I right click on this and go to add layer mask, the layer below says to transfer the layer's alpha channel. So basically it's going to take all of the alpha channel that we created by erasing this. It's going to take it off the original image and put it onto a layer mask. And so if I hit add, you'll see now our image is back to normal. I can right click and go to disable layer mask. That'll temporarily hide the layer mask. So you can see the image below is now back to normal, and all of the transparencies we created got shifted over onto a layer mask. So if I right click and go to disable layer mask again, that will enable the layer mask, and now we can see everything that we've erased right here. And iHeart Gaming, glad to hear that our tutorials have been helping you make some gaming posters. That's pretty awesome. So I'm glad you stumbled upon our channel. Alright, so I'm going to right click and just go ahead and delete this layer mask again. Right click, go to add layer mask. So the next option here is the selection option. And I do recommend going back later and watching this tutorial again. I know this is a lot to take in, Jan, based on your comment. But you can go back and watch this again, so I do recommend doing that once we have finished the live tutorial. And by the way, we've got about 15 and a half minutes left on this live tutorial, so if you got any questions, definitely send them through via the chat. And you can always use the super chat if you want to support our channel and help us keep making more GIMP tutorials. But anyway, the next option for adding a layer mask is to add a layer mask based on a selection. This is a really cool feature that I use a lot. Let me cancel first because we do need to create a selection area. So let's say, for example, I grab my lasso tool and I go ahead and create a selection area by drawing around this chair and our model. So let's say I want to create a selection area in the shape of our chair and the model here. I'm going to do this real quick. This will be kind of sloppy, but you guys will get the point. Alright, so I've loosely selected our model and the chair she's sitting in. If I hit the enter key, it'll create a selection area, which is denoted by these marching ants here. That's what these are called. So let's say I want to create a layer mask now from this selection area. I can right click on here and go to add layer mask, and now I can go to selection right here, and when I click add, it'll now mask out everything outside of that selection area, and so the layer mask here is in the shape of that selection area we just drew. So I'll hit Control Z to undo that and go to select none to turn off the selection. And I'll right click and go to add layer mask again. And you can also create a layer mask based on a grayscale copy of the layer, which basically will create a layer mask from a black and white version of your photo. So if I click on that and click add, it takes a second, but now we've got a layer mask that is created from a black and white version of this photo, and so that creates some interesting effects because remember, black creates transparency, white creates opacity, and if you have gray, it's going to create something in between, so it'll be semi-transparent. So that's why that creates a pretty interesting effect there. So I'll go ahead and delete this layer mask, and then I can right click, go to add layer mask, and the last option here is to create a layer mask based on a color channel. And so right now there's nothing selected in here, and this is based on you have to create a custom channel, and I go through that in the luminosity masks tutorial on my channel, so I definitely recommend checking that out if you haven't seen it yet. That explains how this is useful, so check that out. I'm not going to get too much into that. You also have an option here to invert the mask. So let's say that we basically create a mask from, let's go ahead and go back to the transparency example. So I erase this using the eraser tool, and then I right click, add layer mask, and I want to transfer the alpha channel. So we created an alpha channel by erasing this. Usually if we were to create a layer mask just as is right now, this would be black on the layer mask and this would all be white, because this is what is the see-through part, or this is the opaque part, sorry, this is the see-through part. If I invert this mask, it's going to reverse it. So it's going to turn all of this into the opaque part, and it's going to turn all this into the see-through part. So this will all be black on the layer mask, and this will all be white. So if I check that invert mask option and click add, you'll see now that has all been swapped. And Jan, to answer your question, I have occasionally used a tablet, but I do mostly just work with a mouse. So let me hit Control Z. So now that you guys know about layer masks, you can add layer masks to layer groups. So let me go ahead and unhide this layer group real quick. So let's say I wanted the entire right half of this layer group to be completely transparent. Well, now I can, instead of having to right click on each of these and add a layer mask, I can come up to the layer group, right click, go to add layer mask, and let's just go with white for right now and click, and let me make sure invert mask is unchecked. And if I click add, now this layer group has a white mask on it. And so now if I grab my rectangle select tool and I go ahead and draw this over one half of the image, and then grab my bucket fill tool and fill this in with black, and just give it a second to load. Now the entire right half of my layer group is completely transparent. So I'll go to select none. That's a brand new feature found in GIMP 2.10 and above. I recommend checking out my top 10 new features in GIMP tutorial, or top 10 new features in GIMP 2.10 tutorial, where we go over everything that's new in the latest GIMP 2.10 version. And again, I'm just catching up on the comments. And just a general overview of layer masks. They provide a great way to make edits to your image and only have them affect certain areas of the image, or to blend multiple images together. So I can come over here, right click, add layer mask, and I'll just set this to white full opacity. You can also add gradients to layer masks. So if I grab my gradient tool here, and I'm going to change this real quick to foreground to transparent as the type, and click on this arrow to reverse this. But so right now I have black as my foreground color, and it's going from my foreground color to a transparent color. So if I paint this on this layer mask here by clicking and dragging, you'll see that everything that's black will create transparency, and it'll blend this image, the right side of